Alright guys, so in today's video we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be installing this 13,000 pound winch that we got from OpenRoad 4wheeldrive.com. So let's get into this box and see what all we have. Don't worry about that little guy. Full disclosure, this winch was actually sent to us by OpenRoad 4wheeldrive.com for the purpose of installation and testing out to see how everything looks. Now, I've already gone ahead and opened this thing because, as you guys know, in my videos I never bring you guys anything that I don't trust, or I never bring you anything that's a complete piece of garbage, and this looks like it's really well built. So the model on this one is the 13,000 pound. Alright, so let's see what we got inside the box. Now, we're precariously balancing this thing on the bumper. You like that? So, let's see what's inside the box. Okay, let's get this puppy opened up. Hopefully it doesn't fall. So we have our normal instruction sheet, which we'll most likely just throw in the trash because, you know, we're real men and we don't like instructions. So we've got our instruction sheet, the winch manual, and a nice little OpenRoad 4-wheel drive sticker. We have our negative battery cable. We have our winch hook. We have our wired remote. You guys can see there. And then we have one wireless remote. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, underneath this wonderful stuff, we have another wireless remote. Now, these two wireless remotes are good to up to 50 feet away from the winch, which is amazing because it allows you to kind of get out of the way of things. So let's get this in our nice little OpenRoad hat out of the way, and we'll get down to the actual guts and glory. Now, for those of you that have never used a winch before, this is what they call the solenoid pack. Now, this solenoid pack is going to mount wherever you want it to mount. You can mount it remotely. You can mount it dead on top of the winch, which is what we're going to do because we have the room. But in certain scenarios where your winch is under your bumper and you don't have room for the big solenoid pack, you can mount this under the hood. You can mount it, you know, remotely anywhere. So that's nice that they actually give you that option to do so. Then we have our nice little Fairlead, and the reason why this doesn't need to be a roller Fairlead is simply for the fact that we have a synthetic winch rope. So we'll yank out the winch and we'll get to it. I'll show you what that looks like. There it is. Now, let's go through some quick features. So right here you have a 6 horsepower series wound motor, which is amazing. The series wound motors actually provide more power with less current draw. So it's a little bit easier on your battery, a little bit easier on your alternator, and you don't end up with, you know, big issues with that. Then we have a synthetic winch rope. Now, synthetic winch ropes are great because not only can you get them wet, you can run them down in low temperatures, you can run them in hot temperatures, and this particular rope is tested to over 23,000 pounds. So the nice thing about having synthetic is that, one, if it were to break, which is unlikely, but if it were to break, it doesn't snap nearly as violently as a steel cable does because it doesn't put as much tension on it and it immediately goes slack when it breaks. Still, you'd want to be safe with it. The secondary thing is obviously it's much lighter, it's easier to maneuver, it's nicer on the environment as far as like tying off to trees and things of that nature. And overall, it just makes for a lighter package, a lighter winch, easier cable to deal with. You don't have to run a roller Fairlead up in the front here so that you don't damage the cable, and a bunch of other stuff. Now, this unit also has a really nice handle here for disengaging and re-engaging. You just turn and spin, drop it back down again. Super nice, fits in the hand really well, and that'll give you the ability to free the winch or run the winch. Now, one of the other nice things about this particular unit too is that it has an automatic brake in it. So as the winch slows down and stops, the motor and the planetary system will actually hold the winch wherever you placed it. So it's not like if you let off the button, the winch is just automatically going to spool cable out of here. It'll stop in place, which is a great little thing about these winches. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead, now that I've explained a little bit about this winch to you, we're going to go ahead and get this thing installed on this nice Fishbone off-road bumper. And I'll show you a couple little tips and tricks about actually installing one of these on a Jeep especially that you're going to need to know to make things a little bit easier for you, especially if you're by yourself like I am constantly. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to want to do is right off the rip, we're going to flip the winch over on its lid. So we haven't put the solenoid pack on it or anything yet. We're going to flip the winch over on its lid. The winch over on its lid because we've got a package of hardware here. And if you notice, we have these little square nuts here. Those are going to have to actually set into the winch, into the bottom cavity. There's a hole here, one here, one here, and one here. And that's how we're going to bolt the winch to this bumper. So we're going to need to go ahead and just literally slide these right in. And we'll get all 4 of them in there. Okay, so now that we have those 4 inserts in the bottom of the winch, we can take the winch, don't tip it side to side, flip it straight over. And then once we get the holes roughly lined up, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick when it comes to mounting a winch on a Jeep bumper, because there's some hazards underneath that you need to be aware of, especially when mounting the winch. And if you're alone, sometimes it's easier, well, actually, if you have a friend, it's easier to mount the winch to the bumper and then put the bumper on the vehicle. But when you're by yourself a lot like I am, you really need to have like 8 sets of hands to do it correctly. So I'll show you a little trick for mounting these things that I use constantly. All right, so the problem that you'll normally run into, if I can actually show this to you guys, is that the winch bolts are right there, up there, and then there's 2 more that are right above this bar on the Jeep. And if you can kind of see, we're underneath it here. The winch bolts are above that bar. So what I normally do is put you guys on the old tripod-a-roo, point you up at yon bumper, grab ourselves a screw jack here, which you can use a jack stand or whatever you want while you're on the ground. And then we're going to set it to about the bumper height that's on the vehicle. And then we'll move it out of the way. And here's the trick. So I only put bolts in one side. I only actually put bolts in this side right here. So on the passenger side there's bolts, the driver's side there's not. So now what we can do is we can actually take the bumper, swing it out, take our jack, slide it under the bumper, set it on the jack. So now we need more light for you guys because you can't see crap. Maybe that'll help. So now we can actually get to our location with all of our bolts. So let's see if we can light this up a little bit better. All right, so now, well, you can kind of see it, but now you can see that there's, you know, the 4 mounting locations for the winch are 1, 2, 3, and 4, and now we actually have some clear area to take our hardware and screw it on in. And we have a nice steady platform to where we can move our winch around, get it centered, and get up in there and put our little bolts in. So this is just a technique that's actually pretty easy to use. You know, when it comes down to it, and you've only got one set of hands, kind of have to make do with what you got. And what I got is tools. Might not have people, but I got tools. So we're going to use them, because there's no sense in doing this the difficult way. So now what I like to do, now that we got all the hardware in, I like to kind of make sure that the winch is pushed back as far as possible, because we do have to get the rope through there with the Fairlead. So let's make sure we do that before we bolt everything down. And basically what I was just talking about there is the Fairlead is right there, right on the front of the winch here, right on the front of the bumper. You want to make sure that you can get this eyelet through it before you mount your winch down completely, because if you go ahead and you mount your winch too tight, you won't be able to get that in there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tighten those up. Now when I slid this winch, I slid it all the way back, and the reason why I slid it all the way back towards the rear of the vehicle is because when we go to put that Fairlead on in the front, the bolts are a little bit long and they go all the way through the bumper, and they can actually hit the front of the winch. So you don't want them hitting the front of the winch because, you know, just because. And you also don't want to have to mess around with shortening bolts. Now, just to be sure, grab a hold of our, elbow torquometer. Click. 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 All torqued to spec. So now that we have the winch bolted down and bolted in place, we can swing our bumper back over. Let me back you up so you guys can actually see it a little bit. We can take and swing our bumper back off of our jack, swing it over, and lay it in place. And now we can actually bolt the bumper down. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt the bumper in. Once I get the bumper bolted in, once I get the bumper bolted in, that's a tough one. You guys should try that sometime. I'll bring you guys back and we'll finish up the install on the winch. We'll do the wiring, the solenoid pack, and all that stuff. All right, now that we've got the bumper mounted nice and sturdy, all the bolts are in it, everything is good to go, we're going to go ahead and install the Fairlead. Now, if you guys are unfamiliar with winches, what a Fairlead does, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, you probably can, but all these edges are nice and smoothed out and rounded and everything else. It's so when your cable is pulling against either direction of this, you're going to have good cable protection. Always got to protect your cables. But your cable will be protected from snarling or snagging or, ripping or anything else. So the Fairlead actually mounts right to the front of the bumper. And then we have two bolts that secure it, which is going to be fun to do with one hand. Luckily, the bumper is already threaded for it. So we've got one bolt, a short bolt, that actually goes through here and into the bumper. And then we have this little collar. Now this little collar, what it's going to do is going to go in this side of the Fairlead, and when we run our hook back in, we'll have something to hook the hook onto to keep it from flopping around. Alright, so let me get a tool. Alright, we're just going to tighten these up. And we'll tighten the other side. So those are nice and tight. The actual bumper came with some hardware as well, but we're not going to use it because we need it for this hook. So now I want to show you guys something. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. So if we look down in here, right in this area right there, you can see how close that bolt is to the winch. See if we can focus on it. There we go. You can see how close that bolt is to the winch. Now, had we not pushed the winch all the way back when we started doing this, we would have had an issue with that bolt colliding into the actual winch itself and causing damage to it. Same thing goes for that bolt. Super close, but it's not touching. We actually have probably 1/8 of an inch before it does actually touch. So now our Fairlead is installed, and now we can install our hook, which I always tend to just install them facing downwards. I don't know why, it's just habit. You can hook that right there just like that. So now our winch hook is installed, our cable's installed, everything is good there. Now we're going to move on to doing the solenoid pack. Alright, so remember when I told you guys to throw away the instructions? Yeah, don't do that. Because one of the important things that you're going to run into is wiring. So the wiring on this thing is pretty straightforward because the main unit itself right here has color-coded wires. You have your red that's going to go directly to the battery. Then you have a yellow wire, which is going to go to the yellow on the motor. I don't know how well you can see that, if at all. There we go. So you have a yellow that's going to go to the yellow on the motor, a black that's going to go to the black on the motor, and a red that's going to go to the red. But that leaves you with this little guy. Now this little guy is the ground for the wireless module inside so that your wireless remotes will work. There's a little terminal on the very bottom of the winch, which you can't see because my hand's way over here. But there's a terminal way on the bottom, underneath, way down here, that you have to hook this little black wire to. So make sure that you read the instructions at least once and look at them. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to mount this unit on top of the winch. And it's super simple because there's 2 screws back here. We just loosen them all the way up until they're flush with the inside right here. And loosen up this screw. And then it literally just kind of clips over top of everything. So it clips over the front, and then it just slides down like that. You're going to want to make sure that all your wires are not pinched. Nothing is getting in the way here. And that all your wires are flowing in the direction that you need them to go. Once we have everything facing in the direction we want it to go in, we can center the module. And we can come back here and tighten up these screws. And they will latch in underneath the back side of the winch. And you guys can see me tightening the screw here. So it is, I think, a Phillips head screw. We're going to need a little stubby to get back there. Alright, so we'll get back here and just tighten these up quick. You don't have to go super crazy tightening these things down because they'll get pretty close. They'll grab on pretty tight. Okay, so like I said before, we have our 3 main big wires here. that are going to go directly to the motor. And we're just going to go color for color on these. So we'll start with the yellow back here. We'll start with the yellow, and then we'll do the black wire. And I always like to make sure that you're kind of running these in a way that's going to keep everything nice and tidy so that nothing gets snagged or hung up on anything. You never want to rip the wires out of this thing. So I'll tend to leave everything loose until I'm ready to finalize the connections and put them where they need to be, because you don't want to put any excess tension on these wires either. So I tend to try to run them in a way that's going to keep them nice and tidy, but also not super tight, because that can ultimately lead to wire failure. And then lastly, we'll do the red one. And now we can kind of get an idea where these wires are going to sit. We'll go ahead and tighten down the yellow one, because we know that that's exactly where we want that one to sit. Now we can kind of move the black one out of the way, because that's not tight yet. And just for OCD's sake, I like to make sure that these are nice and kind of where they need to be, and they don't rotate when you tighten them. And guys, you don't have to go crazy tightening these things. Just, you know, kind of give them like, you know, enough that you can tighten them with your thumb and be good. And then you can slide the wire cover over top. Get that down on there so that nothing shorts out. And it'll keep it, you know, somewhat away from the elements here. So now our black one is going to want to interfere with the yellow one. So we can kind of manipulate the wire a little bit to get it to fit where we want it. And then we'll tighten up the black one. And again, don't go crazy tightening these things. Just give them a nice little snug. And then we can pull this one over top. Get that cover down on there. There we go. Now we can kind of push that wire back down into its home right there. So we got, you know, nice wire running out that way. We got this wire running out this way. Everything fits really good. And then we can kind of sneak the red one over into that same direction, just to kind of keep everything clean and neat. Get the cover on that one. And then if you want, you can always come back in here later and we'll throw a zip tie on those just to kind of tidy them up a little bit so that they fit really nice. But what we have left now, alright, so what we have left is our red positive wire, which again, you guys can't see shit. Our red positive wire, which is going to go directly to the battery. So we have a decent amount of cable here that'll go directly to our battery. And then we have our ground cable, which again will go directly to the battery. Here's the ground cable. And now the ground cable goes to this terminal that you guys still can't see. Let's see if we can lower you down a little bit. Probably can't see it, but it is right under here. There's a nut right under here. I believe that's also a 14 millimeter. Alright, so there you go. There's the nut in the washer. And then our big negative terminal to the battery is going to go there, as well as our small little terminal from the wireless module. So we'll put the wireless module one on first, so that we're not tightening down a nut onto a tiny little connector. And then we're going to stick our main ground cable onto there. And then we're going to curse and swear and yell until we can get this nut back on underneath here. And then what I like to do is route this cable and the positive cable over in and about the direction that it's going to go, because we're ultimately going to go through right here on the grill. So we want to make sure that we have enough to keep some slack in the cable. And then what I'll do is I'll put a little zip tie on there so that I know where my cables are going to go. Of course, my arm is in the way the entire time. There we go. We'll get these camera angles down one day, guys. So we'll stick a little zip tie on here just to hold these particular wires in place. So again, what you want is you always want to have, you know, enough slack on the wire to where if things move around, it's not going to hurt anything. So now we can go in here, come underneath here and tighten up our little 13mm guy. Now our winch side of things is completely wired. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is I'm just going to clean up these wires a little bit. We'll get everything tied in place so that there's no issue anywhere with any of it and that nothing moves around. The wiring stays where you put it. So now all of our wiring is done. All of our grounds are done. Everything is done right here on the winch. So now we need to go up under the hood. We need to wire these two cables right here directly to the battery. So we're going to run these through and then wire them up directly to the battery. So let me get the Jeep lowered down and then we can hoo. Okay, so running the cabling is not the funnest thing in the world because you have these two massive wires that you have to try to snake through. But luckily on the Jeeps, they're not too bad. What I'll usually do is take yet another zip tie, run it directly through these two leads, tie it, and then this way we have two very easy to maneuver leads. And in these Jeeps, right inside this little cavity right here, there is a section that you can run through right next to the AC condenser lines. You can kind of reach down in next to them. Now again, like I've been saying, make sure you leave some slack in here. Don't over freaking yoink these things because you'll run into issues. And we're going to come back through here and zip tie these, make sure they're good. Show you guys how I'm going to run these. So there's a nice little spot right along this side rail right here where there's a factory harness that runs through. And I've had really good luck with running the wires through there. You just come in here with your little zip tie doohickey, come down through here, and then if we're lucky, alright, now we have our cables run. Negative is going to go to this side of the battery, positive is going to go over here to this side of the battery. So let's get those hooked up. Show you right there. Okay, we'll start with the negative side first, which of course is nice and loose. Guys, battery terminals are always an interesting deal to mess with, and a lot of times if these terminals are messed up, you're better off just putting new terminals on, especially when you're going to be drawing such high current from something like a winch. But these terminals are still good, so. Alright, I don't like the way that that's rubbing. The positive's rubbing on that side. So we're going to come around the front of the battery, come at it this way so that we don't have any risk of shorting that wire out, because you don't want that wire to dead short to anything. So keeping it away from the metal fender is going to be the best thing we can do. Put that on there. We'll give this a nice little tighten. We'll give this side a nice little tighten. Hopefully without breaking stuff. Okay, there we go. So now we got our positive wire there, we got our negative wire there, we got our wires run in a nice location. I don't know if you guys can see, but they all run straight down there and then come out there. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is just zip tie all this stuff up to make it look cleaner. Cut all our tails, and then we're actually ready to test this winch out now. So truthfully, this is not a bad install. I mean, it never really is a bad install with a winch, especially in a Jeep, because they're so short. And the wiring is so short, and everything is just super easy. There's plunzy There's plenty of places to run wiring through. There's plenty of places to mount these winches to. Now, we're not just kind of stuck on this bumper mount for this winch. You can get a receiver hitch mount and you can mount the winch in the rear. You can get just a standard winch mount that works with the stock Jeep bumper. But we decided to go with an actual nice bumper so that it would kind of accommodate the winch a little bit. But there's so many different aspects that you can do. So now that's the installation of it. Let's test this thing out and make sure every aspect of it works like it should. Okay, so the first thing we're going to try is our manual handheld mount. This has a 12-foot cable on it, so you can actually run the cable into the vehicle, operate the winch from the vehicle interior if you're, driving whatever. That's where the wireless stuff is going to come in nice, but there's a little plug on this side. We're going to take this plug, plug it in, and we're going to hit the out button. And there we go. We get out, and we have in. And I'll show you how this hook works right here. So then you can just hook that there and you're good to go. So we know that that works. Now let's make sure our free spool works. Turn that in any direction, clockwise, counterclockwise, doesn't really matter. Now we should be in free spool. We can grab a hold of this and just pull. There we go. Now we can free spool the winch, lock it down, give it a pull. It locks back in. Now we can reel the winch back in. Send our hook over here, or wherever. Perfect. So, the wired controller works beautifully. Unplug that, we'll put the cover back on it. Now we're going to try the wireless controllers. So here's the two wireless controllers, and all you got to do is press the red button, turn it on, you'll see the little red light comes on. Now, let's see what happens if we go out. Beautiful, see? Now, if we go in and out, in and out, in, cut it out. Right? That wireless controller works. Let's see if the other one does. Out. Hey, look at that. Both wireless controllers work. Now, having the wireless stuff is awesome. That's one thing I'm really happy about that they included with this winch was the wireless stuff. So, the last thing. So what we're going to do now is, I don't like the way that this hook is sitting on this thing. That's the only problem that I've found thus far, is that the hook doesn't freely move on the end of here, which we can fix that no problem. So I'm going to go ahead and just take care of that real quick, and we'll bring you guys back. We'll give you some final thoughts. And then, alrighty, that's a little bit better. Now we got some movement on that hook, and we can actually do what we were trying to do before. Just set the hook down on here, run the winch in, and then have the hook sit here nice and tidy without going anywhere or rattling as you're going down the road. So now that's perfect. Everything fits like it should. So nice little winch. Very nice winch. Okay, so what do I think of this nifty little OpenRoad four-wheel drive winch? I think it's amazing. It's their Panther series. It's 13,000 pounds. It's got an incredible synthetic rope on it. The specifications of the motor and the gear drive and the three-stage planetary and everything else is really incredible. Unfortunately, guys, I don't have an area around here right now where I can test this thing out fully. However, I can guarantee you that the owner of this vehicle is going to test this thing out quite fully, and will be sure to let us know how things work out with it. But as far as the install goes, the quality, the build quality, the quality of the accessories, everything seems to be right on par with all the other big name brands. So for literally half the cost, you can get one of these. So now what I need you guys to do is go down in the description, click on that link. If you buy one of these and you use code MORFAB Industries, MORFAB space Industries, you'll get 80 bucks off of this winch. 80 bucks off of this winch when you see the price in your cart is going to be like, oh, wow, okay. So do yourselves a favor, go down, use the code MORFAB Industries, pick one of these up for your Jeep or your pickup truck or your side-by-side or ATV. They have all different models of this. They range all the way, I think, from 8,000 or 9,000 all the way up to 14,000 pound winches. So check them out. You know, it's another one of those companies that came out of nowhere, and they're really doing well with their equipment. The quality is very high. Everything looks really, really good. So hopefully maybe in the future we'll be able to get you guys some video of this being tested and actually used in the real world. But for right now, I'm going to say I'll see you on the next one, which who knows what that might be. We have a Silverado that just came in today that we're going to be taking a look at. And hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you later. Have a good night, everybody.